Japan is known for being a safe and peaceful country, but it has a dark side. One of the most tragic stories is Junko Furuta, a 17 years old girl in 1988. She was kidnapped, tortured, and killed by four teenage boys. This terrible crime shocked Japan and showed that even in safe places, awful things can happen. Junko's story is a reminder of the heightened violence in society. Today, we will talk about what happened to Junko Furuta and why her story is important. Junko was born on January 18, 1971, and grew up in Misato, Saitama Prefecture, where she lived with her parents, older brother, and younger brother. She was a 17-year-old student at Yashio Minami High School while working a part-time job at a plastic molding factory to save money for a planned graduation trip. She was known for being kind, friendly, and hard-working and well-liked by her classmates and teachers. According to her friends, she dreamed of becoming an idol singer. Junko was not only kind and friendly, but she was also very attractive. Many boys admired her and wanted to be in a relationship with her. She had a bright smile and a warm personality that made her stand out. She was the center of attention for many boys around the school, especially the Yakuza members back then. One of the boys who admired Junko was Hiroshi Miyano, who had connections with the Yakuza. Hiroshi wanted to be in a relationship with Junko, more specifically, a physical relationship, but when he asked her out, she rejected him. Hiroshi Miyano took Junko Furuta's rejection as a huge insult. He couldn't accept that she said no to him because he was used to getting what he wanted. To him, her rejection hurt his pride and made him feel humiliated. This anger and sense of insult drove him to seek revenge. On 25 of November 1988, Junko Furuta was biking home from her part-time job when suddenly one random boy kicked her bike, making her fall. Hiroshi Miyano, who had planned this, acted like he wanted to help her. He approached Junko and offered to take her home, pretending to be concerned and kind. Hiroshi did this to win her trust, but his real intentions were far from good. Instead of taking her home, he took her to a place where no one could find them. This was part of his plan to harm Junko. Hiroshi took all of his time raping her over and over. Once he finished, he took her to a hotel and raping her again. Then he called his friends, Joe Ogura and Yasushi Watanabe, and Nobuharu Minato for insulting her and beating her over and over. The captors knew that if they let Junko Furuta leave, she would tell the police about what they had done. They were afraid of getting caught and punished for their actions, so they decided to keep her captive to make sure she couldn't go to the authorities. Hiroshi Miyano forced Junko Furuta to call her parents and tell them that she was okay. They made her lie and say she was staying at a friend's house. This way, her parents wouldn't worry and wouldn't call the police. By doing this, they stopped the police investigation into her disappearance, making it easier for them to keep her captive without anyone looking for Junko. After forcing Junko to lie to her parents, the boys took her to the home of one of the captors, Nobuharu Minato. Junko lived the worst nightmare of her life for the next 42 days. She was held, tortured, and abused in the worst ways. The four boys showed no mercy, and Junko suffered constant torture. The boys made Junko Furuta suffer from extreme hunger. They didn't give her enough food or water, and her body became very weak. Because of the pain and torture she went through, her digestive system started to fail. Whenever she tried to eat, she would vomit because her body couldn't handle the food. This added to her suffering and made her even weaker. After 20 days of extreme torture, Junko Furuta could no longer handle the pain and suffering. She was so desperate that she started to beg her captors to just kill her. She pleaded with them to end her life so she wouldn't have to suffer anymore, but they refused. Instead of showing mercy, they continued to torture her. They ignored her begging and kept causing her more pain and suffering. In these 42 days, she was tortured by the most brutal ways possible, includes raped many times every single day, day and night, in all orifices. Sometimes, she was raped by 12 different other Yakuza members in a single day. She was forced to be left naked most of the time. Many of the men who raped her also urinated on her. She was forced to pleasure herself in front of the captors for their entertainment. She was beaten physically every day. She was beaten with golf clubs, iron rods, bamboo sticks, and various other objects. She had dumbbells dropped on her all over her body, and her head stomped against the ground, face first. She had hot wax poured all over her face with a focus on her eyelids. Her eyelids were also burned with cigarettes and cigarette lighters. She was violated with a long list of various objects in her all orifices, including bottles, broken and unbroken, iron bars, scissors, roasting needles, chicken skewers. She was forced to eat cockroaches and drink her urine. She had fireworks put in her all orifices, leaving damage and severe burns. Her left nipple ripped off by a pair of pliers. Her breasts were stabbed with needles. She was used like a punching bag. After all that extreme pain and torture, Junko looked completely different. She was bruised all over her body with many cuts and injuries. Her face was swollen and battered. She was very thin because she hadn't eaten much food. The pain and suffering made her look very weak and almost undefinable. Her body couldn't take any more, so Junko died later that day. The captors felt very scared after Junko Furuta died. They knew that if they got caught, they could spend the rest of their lives in jail, or even face the death sentence. They were terrified of the punishment they would receive for their terrible actions. This fear made them desperate to hide what they had done. So they came with an evil plan. The boys put her body in an empty 55-gallon drum and filled it with wet concrete. But they didn't notice that some of Junko Furuta's hair was sticking out from the top, which might have revealed something was inside. But they didn't see it as they hurried to get rid of the drum. The captors said hopefully no one would look too closely at an old drum. Later in January, the police arrested Hiroshi Miyano for kidnapping and assaulting a 19-year-old woman. While they were questioning Hiroshi, he falsely confessed Junko Furuta kidnapping and gave them the location of her body. Later, they arrested the 3 other boys. The drum was eventually found by someone who was checking the abandoned lot. When they opened it, the wet concrete was still hard, but they noticed the hair and realized there was something inside. They reported it to the police, who then carefully removed the concrete and discovered Junko Furuta's body. The police were shocked and horrified by what they found. Her body was completely butchered. Yasushi Watanabe was sentenced 3 to 4 years in prison. Nobuharu Minato was sentenced 5 to 6 years in prison. Joe Ogura was sentenced 5 to 10 years in prison. And finally, Hiroshi Miyano was originally sentenced 20 years in prison. The sentences given to Junko Furuta's captors were much low compared to the brutality of their crimes. Many people felt that the punishment did not match the horrific nature of the torture and suffering they did to her. The captors deserved much more severe consequences for their actions.